Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I've worked on a lot of wilderness shows over the years. Grizzly trackers in Montana, bush pilots in Alaska, even that weird spiritual survival retreat in Sedona. But nothing ever really stuck with me like Primal Instinct. Maybe it was the cast, or maybe it was the isolation. But I think it was mostly the silence, not the peace and quiet kind. I mean the kind that crawls into your ears and settles behind your eyes. The kind you only hear after the screams stop. My name's Evan Lorne. I'm a freelance location sound mixer. Boom op, lav wrangler, mic guy, whatever you want to call it. I'm not the guy in front of the camera. I don't get glamour shots. I don't yell cut. I just make sure the audience can hear people breathing heavily when they're about to snap. We were 4 days into a 21-day filming cycle in Olympic National Park, Washington. That place is ancient. Moss-covered cedars thick as cars, rivers cold enough to burn, and rain so constant your bones start to mildew. We were about 15 miles into the Hoh rainforest. No cell signal, no power, no backup. Just a 10-person crew, 8 contestants, and one ego the size of a helicopter. Our producer, Gabe Farrow. The premise of Primal Instinct was survivalist catnip. 8 contestants dropped into the wilderness with minimal gear. No fire starter, no tent, no food. Just a ferro rod, a knife, and a canteen. Their job? Survive, compete in primal challenges, and rack up points. Last one standing wins $250,000. All filmed on location with hidden trail cams, aerial drones, and a skeleton crew in the field. Gabe loved the term immersive realism. We filmed near Mount Tom Creek, way off trail, and base camp was just a few domed tents and a satellite uplink with barely enough bandwidth to send raw dailies. There was a rotation of crew in the field. Me, 2 cam ops, Luis and Morgan, a producer's assistant named Ash, and a wilderness safety medic named Tanya Price, a former Army combat medic who didn't take crap from anyone. Everyone else stayed in the tech camp a few miles back. Editors, data wranglers, and a logistics guy named Harvey who ran the resupplies. Day 1 was textbook. B-roll of the contestants blindfolded in the transport van, forced to navigate out of a fake predator scenario and build their first shelter before sundown. They were a mixed bag. Veterans, influencers, amateur preppers, and one guy from New Jersey who claimed he lived off the grid but couldn't tie a square knot. You know the type. I spent the evening hiking mic packs back and forth and syncing external recorders with our red Komodos. Long days, but clean audio. We all slept in shifts under rainflies listening to frogs and distant elk calls. Day 2 is when the first whispers started. At 6:50, Gabe called over the radio. "Evan, you got ears on Channel 3? I answered groggily, sipping instant coffee from a titanium mug. "Yeah, what's up?" Harvey's not responding. No check-in last night, and we're getting static from the uplink. "Might just be the storm rolling in," I said, checking the barometric pressure on my handheld. "Rain's gonna eat half the spectrum." "Yeah, still weird. I'll send Ash to hike up and ping the relay." Ash left around 9 o'clock. She had a Garmin InReach with SOS capability and knew how to climb the ridge trail fast. I didn't worry. This wasn't our first rodeo. The contestants spent the morning arguing over fire building techniques. I stayed on a tree platform with Morgan, listening in on their body mics. Not much action, just grumbling about wet tinder and a rabbit that someone failed to snare. Around 11:30, we heard the first scream. It wasn't close. maybe 300 meters east of camp near the creek. I froze, hand on the boom pole. Morgan looked at me. That wasn't one of ours, was it? Not unless Tanya took up yodeling. We called it in to Gabe, who ordered everyone to keep rolling. I slung my recorder and followed the sound with Morgan and Tanya, who'd grabbed her medkit and sidearm, a Sig Sauer M18 with an aftermarket optic. Military issue, and she knew how to use it. We didn't find a person, just a tent, shredded, half covered in wet moss, and what looked like blood sprayed across the ferns. Not fresh, flies already on it. Tanya crouched beside it. Not animal, no claw marks. This was a stabbing or a bite, human teeth maybe. Bite? I repeated. Yeah, she said slowly, standing. Molars. Big ones. Not clean. Morgan whispered, This isn't in the script, right? We hiked back to camp slower than we left. Gabe was furious when we told him. Not about the blood, about the camera footage. You left your GoPros in the case? You're kidding me. We thought someone was hurt, I said. Do you know what immersive realism costs per day, Evan? Always be rolling. Ash didn't return that night. Day 3 started with silence. Cold air rolled in from the mountains, and mist hung thick across the tree line. The contestants were already awake, sitting around a smoky fire. No one was talking. One of them, Shauna, a Navy vet with frostbite scars on her fingers, kept looking into the woods like she expected someone to come walking out. She wasn't wrong. At 8:12, Ash stumbled into camp, mud-caked and wide-eyed. Her shirt was torn and she'd lost a boot. I ran to catch her as she collapsed near the fire pit. Tanya checked her for injuries while I recorded ambient, and Morgan captured the moment on his shoulder rig. Ash kept repeating, They were dead. They were dead. They weren't supposed to get up, before passing out. She had 2 bite marks on her thigh. Human. Tanya cleaned and dressed the wounds, but didn't look hopeful. Gabe, of course, was already pitching ideas. We'll keep her isolated. Could be our mid-season twist. Audience loves real stakes. Tanya took me aside. Evan, listen, that bite, it's turning black. Fast, like necrosis. We need to evac her now. We tried to hail the uplink, nothing but hiss. At noon, I powered up the drone to scout the old forestry road. It was blocked. 3 fallen cedars and what looked like a burned-out ranger truck on its side. We were trapped. By sunset, Ash started convulsing. She had a seizure near the med tent. Frothing, jerking, then she went limp. Tanya declared her dead at 1843. But she didn't stay that way. At 1911, Ash sat up. Her eyes were wrong. Milky, bloodshot, vacant. Shauna saw it first and yelled. Gabe screamed, Cameras! Cameras! But Morgan dropped his and ran. Ash lunged at Tanya. Tanya fired once, center mass, and Ash kept moving. The second shot went through her left eye. She dropped. Dead again, this time for good. No one slept that night. The contestants demanded answers. Was this a stunt? Was this the next challenge? Was Ash wearing prosthetics? Gabe tried to play it off. The lines between reality and performance are meant to blur, he said on camera. Shauna called him a psychopath. One of the influencers, Brian, started filming his own vlog like it was bonus content. You guys are seeing this, right? This is gold, pure viral gold. Day 4, the first contestant vanished. His name was Curtis, former firefighter, Georgia. Had a bad limp from an old ladder fall. Reliable, quiet. He went to collect rainwater and never came back. We found his poncho shredded near a game trail. No blood, just drag marks leading into the trees. Tanya took inventory. We had 2 rifles, 4 flare guns, 1 satellite phone with a cracked screen, and food for maybe 3 days. That's when the contestants stopped playing. One of them, Janelle, a CrossFit coach, grabbed the producer's walkie and smashed it with a rock. The act wasn't some impulsive outburst. She looked right at Gabe as she did it. He was mid-sentence, trying to spin Ash's death into a psychological survival arc. Something about fear being the truest test of human instinct. She didn't say a word, just dropped the walkie into the mud after the plastic split. The moment echoed across camp. Gabe went pale, and no one rushed to stop her. Honestly, I think we all felt it was overdue. The atmosphere shifted. This was no longer a set. The forest wasn't a prop. We weren't crew and contestants. We were just people, exposed, cornered, and rapidly losing patience with the illusion of control. That illusion had been Gabe's lifeline, and it shattered with the walkie. No more orders, no more immersive realism. No one was playing anymore. We held an emergency meeting in the main tent that night. 12 of us left, 6 crew and 6 contestants. Everyone sat on foam sleeping pads or gear crates, jackets zipped up against the cold. Tanya laid out what little we had. Half a dozen MREs from the med kit, some scavenged wild edibles, and protein bars originally planted for reward challenges. Morgan had bruised ribs from when Ash attacked Tanya, and Luis was still shaken from finding Curtis's torn poncho earlier that day. The satellite phone wasn't responding to our SOS pings. Tanya had removed the battery to conserve juice, but when she booted it again, the screen flashed red for a moment, then shut off completely. Water damage, probably. The battery had held a charge, but the internal circuits were toast. Shauna suggested we build a fortified perimeter and wait. She had some military training, naval logistics, but she'd done time on deployments and knew basic field defense tactics. But Tanya shot that down. We're not in a defendable location. Too many trees, limited visibility, no hard cover. If someone comes at night, we won't see it coming until it's too late. That someone didn't need elaboration. We all remembered Ash, the slow rise, the eyes, the inhuman persistence even after taking a bullet to the sternum. Janelle proposed heading west toward the coast. Ho River Trail should lead out, she said. If we cut through and follow the ridgeline, we'll hit Highway 101 within 3 days. Maybe 2 if we don't stop. I knew the trail. We'd hiked portions during the B-roll scouting. It was rugged, especially near Bogachiel Peak, but it could be done. The only problem was crossing without proper gear. Our maps were damp. The GPS was long dead. Compass? Tanya's had a cracked lens, and mine had been lost when Ash seized near the fire pit. Still, there wasn't another option. Staying meant waiting for something worse to find us. We left at dawn on day 5. Each person carried what they could. Gabe insisted on bringing his field tablet and 2 hard drives, claiming the footage was historically significant. No one argued. Let him carry the dead weight. Tanya distributed basic supplies: knife, paracord, poncho, bandages. The 2 rifles went to Tanya and Shauna. The flare guns were shared between Morgan, Janelle, and me. I kept my Zoom F8 field recorder. It was dead, but the casing was rugged and doubled as storage for backup SD cards. Force of habit, maybe. I also had a solar charger rigged to my backpack, more of a joke gadget from an REI shoot, but sometimes it gave enough juice to run the mic interface or the backup light. We moved single file, no talking unless necessary. The moss-laden silence of Olympic National Park closed around us like a wet shroud. Massive Sitka spruces towered above, and the trail narrowed as we descended toward the valley. Morning fog clung low, and everything, our boots, our sleeves, even our breaths, felt muffled and heavy. The forest was no longer beautiful. We made 6 miles before dusk. That night, we camped in a dry creek bed near a stand of vine maples. No fire. Tanya set a rotating watch, 2 people up per shift. I was paired with Luis, who kept rubbing the back of his neck and muttering about how quiet it was. It was the kind of quiet that felt staged, like the forest was holding its breath. The next morning, we found tracks. Not animal. Human. Barefoot, heel to toe. Dozens of them, crossing the trail in random zigzags. Some prints were small, child-sized. Others looked wrong, misshapen. One had broken toes dragging in the mud. No boot marks, no signs of clothes, no indication of recent camps nearby. We kept walking. By day 7, people were breaking down. Brian, the influencer, started losing it first. He hadn't put his phone down even though it had been dead for days. He kept pretending to record vlogs, miming selfies, and saying things like, "Smash that subscribe if you think I'm gonna make it out." Nobody laughed. Then he started asking if we thought the whole thing was a simulation. Like, what if this is a show? What if the world's fine and we're just the ones being tested? He snapped when Gabe finally told him to shut up. Lunged at him with a stick, yelling about mind control and staged hallucinations. Tanya restrained him hard. We zip-tied his wrists with cord and made him walk middle of the pack. It wasn't cruelty, it was necessity. We couldn't afford noise or delays. The next night, the rain came. Not a drizzle, a downpour. Sheets of it, hammering our tarps and soaking everything through. The trail became a trench. Shauna lost her footing near a ledge and twisted her ankle bad. We made a splint from a broken camera tripod. She kept walking, teeth gritted, until her sock filled with blood and she collapsed from exhaustion. That night, we made a small fire under a fallen log archway. Just enough heat to dry a pair of boots and warm some instant rice. It was the only night we took the risk. That was the night we heard the music. Soft, barely there. A distorted melody drifting through the trees, like an old record playing half-speed. Faint violin and crackling static coming from somewhere uphill. Janelle stood immediately. "You hear that?" she whispered. "That's not wind. That's a speaker." We killed the fire and waited. I heard again, clearer, what sounded like a child humming, and then a loop of what might have been a lullaby or a broken radio jingle. The sound stopped as suddenly as it started. Tanya signaled for everyone to pack quietly. We left camp before dawn, without breakfast. By day 9, we reached the river crossing. The bridge marked on our waterlogged map was gone, swept away in a flood, replaced by a rusted logjam in a half-submerged boulder field. We'd have to ford it. Fast-moving water, waist-deep and ice-cold. Luis went first, using a trekking pole as balance. He made it. Then Gabe tried. He slipped. One moment he was upright, the next he was gone, swept downstream, flailing, his tablet crashing against the rocks. The hard drives vanished in the current. I saw his head surface once before the water took him around a bend. We didn't find his body. We didn't go looking. Janelle whispered a prayer. Shauna cried quietly, ankle throbbing, holding onto the rifle like it was a lifeline. When we made it across, something was waiting on the other bank. A figure, standing motionless in the trees, ragged clothes, eyes milky white, arms limp at the sides. Its skin hung slack, bloated and pale like soaked parchment. We froze. It didn't move. Then behind it, another, and another. 5 in total, spaced unevenly like they'd wandered there by chance. But they didn't make sound. They didn't blink. Just stared. Tanya raised the rifle, and we backed away slowly, retreating deeper into the brush. We didn't fire. Firing would only echo. Firing meant inviting more. That decision saved us, at least for the moment. The creatures, if you could still call them that, watched us go without giving chase. Their heads didn't swivel, and their bodies barely shifted. It was as if they were waiting for something. Or maybe their awareness was fragmented. Eyes open, but no coordination behind them. Whatever the reason, we moved without hesitation, weaving through ferns and fallen branches, soaked to the bone but alive. We climbed higher into the ridge to avoid being tracked. Shauna could barely walk, leaning hard on Janelle's shoulder, her wounded ankle now visibly swollen. Tanya and I scouted ahead, staying low and off-trail, cutting through dense salal shrubs and navigating by topography alone. We had no working map anymore. The best we could do was head west and hope we hit the road. That shortcut cost us. By midday, the terrain pitched into steep gullies and deadfall. At one point, we found ourselves halfway down a slope with no clear path forward. What should have been an hour's detour became 5 hours of clawing through slick undergrowth, legs giving out under exhaustion and cold. The temperature dropped as the wind picked up through the trees, and with the wind came the smell, something sharp and rotting, carried on the breeze like a warning. We camped that night beneath a granite overhang that offered partial shelter. Everyone was starving. We had one MRE left and shared it in silence, beef stew, cold, barely edible. I gave most of mine to Shauna, who was pale and feverish, her lips cracked from dehydration. Tanya unwrapped a water purification straw and started collecting runoff from the cliff edge. The water tinted brown but at least free of visible larvae. At some point in the night, I must have dozed off, because I woke to a sound I hadn't heard in days. Music. A radio, weak and crackling but unmistakable. Everyone stirred. We held our breath and listened. It was a male voice, distorted by static, cutting in and out. I only caught fragments. Something about emergency services, possible safe zone at Forks High School gymnasium, and then the audio clipped, replaced by dead air and a high-pitched whine. Tanya grabbed the satellite phone and flipped it open on instinct, forgetting it was broken. Janelle stood wide-eyed. "Did that sound real to you?" I nodded, my heart hammering. The signal hadn't come from the phone. It had been broadcast. Possibly shortwave, possibly local. It meant someone out there was transmitting, which meant someone had power, maybe even a generator, maybe even a safe perimeter. The direction of the sound was hard to judge with the echo off the rock wall, but Tanya was sure it had come from downslope toward the river valley. Forks was west. It made sense. We left at first light. By day 11, the forest changed again. The trees grew thinner. The underbrush thickened into a wall of green, and the trail, if it could even be called that, was swallowed by blackberry bramble and windfall. We passed a deer carcass in the undergrowth, half-eaten, not by a bear. The bite marks were human-sized. Luis threw up. That afternoon, we found the campground. It must have been closed years before the outbreak. Weathered wooden signs marked Gravel Creek Campsite, faded with moss and lichen. The fire pits were rusted out, the shelters had collapsed. But there was a trailhead kiosk, and inside, a laminated topographical map. We gathered around it like it was holy scripture. Forks was 16 miles west by the map's scale. That was still 2, maybe 3 days with Shauna hobbling, but it was a real goal. More than that, we found a dotted line labeled Utility Access Road running southwest, cutting across ridgelines and eventually joining with Highway 110. That would be our new path. We rested there for several hours. Tanya cleaned Shauna's ankle with iodine wipes and secured the splint with gaffer tape from my gear bag. I rewrapped the last few protein bars in plastic and repacked my kit. Morgan sat on a log, fidgeting with the flare gun, practicing dry trigger pulls and looking off into the woods like he was expecting someone. Later that night, Morgan confessed something that stayed with me. When Ash went down, he whispered, I think he blinked. Just once. Right before Tanya shot him. I've been thinking about it for days, like maybe he was still in there, somewhere. I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed, but because I wasn't sure I hadn't seen the same thing. A flicker, a twitch, some buried shred of consciousness, trapped behind whatever that sickness had done to him. We didn't sleep well after that. By day 12, we found the road. It wasn't much, a narrow gravel access lane choked with branches and mud, but it was a road, the kind trucks used for maintenance on cell towers or fire crews during dry season. There were faded tire tracks in the dirt, but nothing recent. We followed it west. Late in the afternoon, the first real sign of civilization appeared. A weather-beaten utility shack, padlocked and covered in warning stickers. Tanya shot the lock clean off, wasting a precious round, and we raided the inside for anything useful. A flare vest, 2 unopened water bottles, a can of sterno, and a coil of yellow nylon rope. Jackpot. We stayed the night in the shack, dry for the first time in days. Shauna's condition worsened. Her leg was swollen past the knee and she'd started hallucinating, muttering about hearing Ash's voice calling from the woods. We lit the sterno in a coffee tin to provide a little warmth, and I gave her the last ibuprofen. The next morning, she was gone. No sign of struggle, just her boots and rifle left by the door. Janelle found a trail of blood drops leading out toward the trees, but had vanished in the ferns after a few meters. Luis insisted we follow, but Tanya refused. If she's turned, we can't help her. If she's alive, she chose to leave. Either way, we move forward. It was brutal, but it was the only decision that made sense. Day 13 was a blur of movement. We stuck to the gravel road, rationing sips of water and stopping only when someone collapsed. Brian, the influencer, cracked again around midday. He stopped walking, sat down in the middle of the trail, and said he wasn't going any farther unless someone gave him a straight answer about whether we were on a set. Tanya didn't argue. She handed him one of the flare guns, set a granola bar on the ground beside him, and kept walking. We never saw him again. By dusk, we found pavement. Actual pavement. Faded white lines. Mile marker posts. We had reached the edge of Highway 110. Beyond it, dense fog clung to the treetops, but the faint silhouette of buildings was visible ahead. Forks. The town wasn't large, maybe 3,000 people before all this, but it was our first real destination. We approached slowly, staying in the tree line. No smoke, no lights, no signs of movement. We cut across an empty field toward the outer buildings, what looked like an equipment rental shop, some broken windows, and a rusted-out delivery van parked sideways in the lot. Morgan scouted the front with Tanya. Janelle and I stayed back, watching the road behind us. Then I saw it. A light. Flickering. Up ahead, near what looked like a gymnasium structure. A window glowed red for a second, then dimmed, then red again, like a flare or warning beacon. Tanya saw it too. We made a run for it, cutting across the parking lot, through a chain-link fence that had been bent back at the top. Inside the gym, the air was thick with the smell of bleach and burnt plastic. Cots were scattered across the floor. Makeshift dividers made from shower curtains and garbage bags. And then, on the far side, a working generator. The low mechanical hum of the generator was almost soothing after days of silence. Tanya stepped in front of me with her rifle raised, sweeping the far side of the gym where rows of cots created a crude maze. Someone had been living here, recently. Empty water jugs, medical wrappers, a pile of torn-up clothing, and a clipboard with a partially filled roster still lay on a plastic table. Someone had tried to keep track of names. Most had been crossed out. The generator was real, a compact Honda EU 7000, gasoline-fed, mounted on a rolling cart with two 5-gallon jerry cans strapped beside it. The fuel gauge read just above E, but it was still running. That alone was a miracle. A string of LEDs was clipped to the rafters, half burned out, flickering like distant lightning. A trail of extension cords ran toward what looked like an improvised control station built out of AV carts, battery packs, and an old Sony broadcast monitor. This was more than a shelter. This had been a communication hub. "Looks like they were broadcasting from here," I said, stepping toward the AV rack. I recognized the equipment instantly. An old-school analog mixer, a few HDMI converters, and a high-8 tape deck, bizarrely rigged into the signal chain, likely a last-ditch way to preserve footage. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. Janelle lifted a heavy tarp and uncovered what we'd hoped for but hadn't dared believe. A long-range VHF radio, still wired into an upright antenna mounted on a dolly. There was even a patch cable running to the gym's roof. Luis touched the microphone but didn't press the transmit button. "Should we try?" Tanya gave a single nod, still scanning the balcony above. "Do it, but be fast." I took the mic. The battery indicator blinked yellow. Maybe 15% left. I switched to channel 16, the standard emergency frequency. My thumb hovered over the transmit key for a moment. Then I pressed down. "This is field crew from Olympic Survival. Repeat, we are not infected. 5 survivors requesting emergency evac. Current location, Forks High School Gymnasium. Generator active. Signal repeat in 5 minutes." I released the button and waited. We all did. Nothing. Only the quiet whir of the generator and the soft rustle of the curtain dividers as the wind shifted through the broken vents above. No reply. Not even static. Luis was about to say something when we heard it. Metal clanging. Not from the balcony, from beneath the bleachers. Everyone turned at once. Tanya raised her rifle. Janelle aimed her flare gun, though it shook in her grip. A shadow moved just behind the third row of benches, then another, then a voice. A young one. Weak, rasping female. "Help!" We froze. Tanya signaled me forward, and I crept along the edge of the bleachers, keeping low. Flashlight in one hand, I shined it into the darkness below. She was maybe 16. Thin, covered in dirt and sweat, wearing a blood-stained windbreaker. Her eyes looked glassy, but her skin wasn't pale, and I saw no visible bites. "My name's Ellie," she whispered. "Please, don't leave." We pulled her out slowly. She was alone. Had been for days, she said. Everyone else in the shelter had gone outside when they heard the first broadcast, an offer of evac from Port Angeles. None came back. The broadcast had been a trap. It had aired twice a day for 4 days, always in a loop. Whoever recorded it had used the voice of a FEMA operator, layered with background static and tonal sweeps to mimic a genuine emergency alert. But it had originated locally. Ellie had traced it to a portable tower on a flatbed parked behind the gym. She tried to stop them from leaving, but they didn't believe her. Tanya and I checked the truck. It was still there, still transmitting. The portable tower was a cobbled-together rig of scaffolding, PVC pipe, and a transmitter lifted from a community radio van, and at its heart, zip-tied into a waterproof case, was a Raspberry Pi. A simple code loop, repeating the same message, playing back through a portable DAC. Someone had set a bait signal. Someone who knew survivors would come looking, and whoever had done it hadn't just wanted to lure the infected. They'd wanted people. That night, we locked the gym doors, barricaded them with anything we could move, and decided on watches. I took the second shift, around 2:30 a.m., while I monitored the hallway with a headlamp and Tanya's binoculars. Ellie sat near the control station, watching the old broadcast monitor loop stock footage, cuts from news segments and survival show B-roll. She didn't speak much. By the time dawn came, Morgan had a plan. "We can't stay here," he said. "This place is a magnet. That tower's calling in everything with ears, infected or not." He was right. Janelle had spotted two figures at the edge of the trees just before sunrise, moving, yes, but not stumbling. Observing. One even had binoculars. That confirmed it. This wasn't just about survival anymore. We were being hunted. Day 16. Tanya announced we'd head north toward the Quileute Airport. The old airstrip had been inactive for years, but its hangars were still standing. If anyone had taken over a defensible position in this part of the peninsula, that would be it. The old airfield was 5 miles up Mora Road, and if we could get the broadcast gear loaded onto the delivery van out back, we could take the transmitter with us and warn others on our terms. It took half the day to get the van running. The battery was dead, but one of the generator cables still had enough juice for a jump. Luis siphoned fuel from an abandoned school bus out front. I loaded the AV gear and secured the tower frame to the van's roof using cam straps from the gym's gear locker. Ellie insisted on coming with us. She knew the route. We didn't argue. That night, just before we left, Tanya lit a flare and raised it high on the flagpole outside the gym, one last signal to any nearby survivors. 10 minutes later, we heard the infected. The van's engine roared to life just as shapes began crashing through the fence line. Dozens. They weren't slow anymore. These ones sprinted. Luis drove. I leaned out the side door with the flare gun. Tanya opened fire behind us, dropping 3 before she ran out of ammo. The last thing I saw before we crested the hill and left Forks behind was a man in a fireman's jacket standing atop the school roof, filming us. Day 17 through 21 was a blur of roadblocks and backtracking. The highway was littered with wreckage, burned out SUVs, jackknifed semis, crushed motorcycles. But the infected were thinner here, more scattered. Tanya speculated that whatever was controlling their movement, instinct, noise, scent, or something worse, had drawn the masses inland. The airport was still standing. The gates were down, and the runway cracked with years of moss growth, but the hangars had been reinforced with stacked concrete barriers and shipping containers. A makeshift watchtower had been built out of scaffolding. Inside, survivors. Real ones. About 30 of them. Firefighters, state troopers, a pilot, and even a couple of wildlife biologists. They had a well, a fuel cache, solar panels, and best of all, a drone that still worked. They called their setup Echo Field. We were taken in with suspicion, but once we showed them the footage and the transmitter rig, everything changed. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were messengers. Over the next 2 days, we worked non-stop. I rewired their control room. Tanya helped with perimeter patrol. Janelle trained 2 of their medics. And on day 21, we powered up the transmitter and sent a real message. This is Echo Field, Western Olympic Peninsula. Survivor outpost active. Coordinates locked. If you can hear this, you're not alone. Do not follow false FEMA signals. We are here. We are human. Repeat, Echo Field is secure. Luis cried. Not because we were safe, but because now someone else might be too. That night, we aired the last of the survival footage, not for ratings, not for fame, but because the world needed to see what had happened, what people had done to each other, what they'd become, and what we could still be. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.